Thank you for a very warm introduction from dear MC. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semuanya. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Good afternoon, dear delegates of student organization, namely President University Major Association of International Relations or PUMA IR, my fellow lecturers. We have the Dean of Faculty of Humanities, Sir Andy Haryono, Ibu Nino, Ibu Natasha, Ibu Isyana, and also delegates from Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, FPCI. We have here Ibu Afni Damanik. Thank you so much. Civitas Academica, President University. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is John Francois, who will be the moderator of our public lecture today. Dear His Excellency, Mr. Ambassador of the European Union to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam, Mr. Vincent Piquet or Vangsang Piquet. Welcome to the best private university in Indonesia, President University. Because Mr. Vangsang is also speak French, so I would like to have a warm welcome to you. Cher son excellence, Monsieur de l'Ambassadeur de l'Union Européenne en Indonésie et Brunei Darussalam, Monsieur Vangsang Piquet. Bienvenue dans la meilleure université privée d'Indonésie, l'Université des Présidents. The word president here is not just the name. We are not just doing the learning in class, but we have complementary programs for students, lecturers, and all staff to train ourselves to be the leader in everywhere we are studying. As the Dean of Faculty of Humanities, Mr. Andy Haryono already said, President University is still having accreditation A from Republic of Indonesia Ministry of Education. President University offers strong international learning and research and environment. The lectures at the President University are carried out in English. The number of international students at the President University is one of the highest among all universities across Indonesia. President University is located in one of the largest industrial estates in Southeast Asia, Jababeka Industrial Estate, where various companies from many countries establish and run their business. This year, we also successfully delivered our alumni to the best universities in the world. And in our modern building and digital-based campus, we really make the good use of civic space in digital era for academic purposes, the education, research, collaboration, as well as to do the campus branding. In digital literacy, we also learn about the public space, private space, civilian rights, cybercrime, cyber defense, cyber safety, and also cyber security. The guidelines also we have from UNESCO for the civilians to have deeper understanding about the misinformation or disinformation and fake news. We can also read on the link. And also as the leader, as G20 in this metaverse era, it is very important that Indonesians can learn valuable lessons from the European Union regarding our theme focus of public lecture today, disinformation and fake news, European Union approach on creating a civic space in this digital era. So we will discuss how European Union anticipate the cybercrime, what regulations that are being considered effective to protect civilians in cyber world, why civic space in the digital era is important in the European ambience of safety of definition, and how European Union doing the digital diplomacy. Even we have robotic diplomacy, artificial intelligence diplomacy, and metaverse diplomacy nowadays. Before His Excellency Mr. Ambassador will deliver his public lecture, I would like to read the curriculum vitae. Mr. Vangsang Piquet is now the ambassador of the European Union to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam. He was the head of division for Algeria, Libya, Morocco, Tunisia, Middle East and North Africa Department, European External Action Service in Brussels, head of the European Union Office to Hong Kong and Macau Special Administrative Region in People's Republic of China, the Ambassador of the European Union to Malaysia, Head of Unit Centralized Operation for Asia and Central Asia, Directorate General for International Partnership, European Commission in Brussels. Monsieur Vangsang Piquet has the doctorate degree in Arts, Radboud University, Nijmegen, the Netherlands, Master of Arts, Radboud University, Nijmegen, Netherlands, as well as University of Hull, United Kingdom, Fellow of American Studies Department, Yale University, New Haven, USA, alumnus of the Fulbright Program, Fellow of the American Council of Learned Societies. He is speaking as a polyglot, right? You are speaking also English, French, German and Dutch. Okay, thank you so much. His Excellency, Mr. Vaksa PK, you can deliver the public lecture. I will remind you if the time is almost limited for about 40 minutes. Yes. Okay. How about 35? Sorry. Okay. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thanks very much, Dr. Jan. And thank you very much, Dr. Andy, Dean of the Humanities Faculty. Thank you very much to President University, the best private university in Indonesia, I've just learned. Thank you for your welcome this afternoon. Thank you to the colleagues of FPCI, Ray and Asfi, who is, I think, a graduate of President University. So, colleagues of FPCI, the Foreign Policy Community Indonesia, with whom my diplomatic mission cooperates a lot for public diplomacy, all sorts of activities, including the ambassador lectures, and one of them is now being hosted here at President University. As a matter of fact, this is the first time since the start of COVID that we are holding this lecture in person. Thank you. And so I'm very happy about that, and that we are doing that here today. I've chosen this topic because it is so relevant at the present day in world history. It's a topic that affects everybody, wherever you are, whoever you are, and whatever you do. Because we're all consumers of information, information that we do not produce ourselves. We don't, as a result, always know the origin of information. We don't know the authenticity of information that we use. So we're, in many respects, at a loss about how to judge things that we read, that we see, how to use these things, how to convey and spread these things further to your family members, to your university colleagues, to your colleagues at work. And of course that is a problem that is especially difficult in the situation of today's social media, which have caused an explosion of information around the world, and which is fantastic, of course, on one hand, but it also has risks. So I have some slides, and now we can turn to the first slide. Yes. And I'll be very brief so that we have some time for discussion. So it's disinformation is, of course, as a concept, nothing new. It has been with us ever since the start of history, but the means are new. There are different shapes and guises of disinformation, and but the thing is that very often disinformation is part of a campaign by an entity, by a government, by a group of people or individuals that have a certain goal. And we have, as the European Union, discovered this threat for the first time really or diagnosed it as a political problem for us in 2015. And that is not an accidental year. It is the year after Russia invaded and annexed the Crimea peninsula that belonged to Ukraine, but they took it. And ever since, we have been in a standoff with Russia over that problem. That's later evolved, particularly this year, of course. But ever since, we have been subject, or object, if you like, of disinformation. And that was diagnosed by our leaders in 2015, who decided that we have to do something as European Union, not just the individual member states of the EU, but also as a union, to protect ourselves. Disinformation involves all sorts of stakeholders, individuals, of course, institutions, non-state actors, so organized groups, political or crime, but also foreign states. And a very important thing to bear in mind is that disinformation erodes trust that you and I have in institutions, in what we read, in what we see, lack of erosion of trust in institutions, but also an erosion of trust in media, especially the traditional media, the newspapers that we used to rely on, or the main television news that we used to watch. So, disinformation, in other words, is bad for democracy, it's bad for the civic space. And we did polls about this in Europe, and no fewer than 80% of Europeans said that they have been subject or the target of information, have been affected by it several times per month, which is very, very high. That's what they know. And 85% of respondents said that this is a problem for themselves and also for the society in which they live. Next slide, please. So, we have to do something about it. And first of all, you need to understand what it is. And here are very schematic, the different concepts that we have to deal with. So disinformation, as we understand it, which is false or misleading content that is created and disseminated intentionally to deceive individuals or societies for a particular political or economic gain. And disinformation is often also seen as harmful to the society in which it is spread. Misinformation is a different thing. It's something that's still untruth, but it is not something that is shared intentionally to harm somebody else. Fake news, something that is quite old, of course, as a concept, but it's just inaccurate, sensational, sensationalist, misleading information. But the British press, the Daily Mail and the Sun, of course, are newspapers that have always excelled at fake news. Lastly, propaganda. This is content that is disseminated to promote your own cause or to damage the cause of somebody else. And often this goes hand in hand with particular unethical persuasion techniques. So those are the different concepts, and what we deal with mostly is at the present moment is this information, and that is because it is something that has taken such a volume and such a scale through the social media that it is really a threat to our societies and to our political systems. It's a much wider phenomenon that we've ever known, and it has brought about a lot of economic insecurity. It has promoted extremism. Look at the debates in different countries, but particularly also in the United States during the past 5 or so years. It has caused cultural shifts in society and cultural divisions in society, and that, of course, is a breeding ground for instability and for tensions. All things, of course, that societies, that governments want to protect themselves against. Whenever you open your Google or your Yahoo or whatever you use, you see a very widespread phenomenon as well, and that is disinformation that is unintentional. On the Google homepage, you always see some news items. Much, of course, is totally unimportant, but much read. Kim Kardashian's latest statements about this or that. But the other day, when I opened my Google, there was all of a sudden an item where the Sheikh of Bahrain, the state in the Gulf, was quoted as saying that the European Union should not buy gas from Bahrain, but from Russia. And he was quoted as saying, as very shortly after our president had visited Bahrain to sign a big agreement to buy precisely gas. So, to me as a reader, it didn't make sense at all. But it looks sort of credible. There's a photo and some text and so forth, a quotation. But of course, this was a very typical case of disinformation, sheer lie, that ended up on the Google homepage and had not been edited clearly. Nobody had checked the veracity, the truthfulness of this information, and millions of people have probably read it, like myself. I can say, however, that not too long after I had seen this, this item was taken down, so I think that there had been some editor looking at this site and wondered himself, can this be true or not? So, but it is one very good example of the sort of phenomena that we deal with. So, disinformation on the one hand, that ends up on the home pages of the trusted platforms that you and I use and get tremendous exposure as a result. So social networks and the internet are tremendous spreaders of disinformation. Next slide, please. So what does the European Union do about this? Ever since 2015, we have run this campaign, EU versus Disinfo. And as I mentioned, this was set up in order to counter the disinformation that came from Russia after the annexation of Ukraine in 2015. And the task of this EU versus Disinfo was simply to challenge some or much of what we read in these disinformation campaigns. Countering this disinformation campaign meant for us also countering Russia's aggression against another European country. And so, how do you do that? Principally by exposing disinformation that you see, by providing counter information that we know as being true, and explain why the disinformation is false, and thereby reassure the public. And of course, this is an endless task. It's not over one day, it goes on and on and on. And if you are honest with yourself, then you must observe that the Kremlin disinformation machinery is very powerful and has a lot more resources than we have to counter it. So you're always in a defensive mode in dealing with this. But still, it's got to be done. EU versus disinfo is something that you can find on the website, so do take a look at how it works. Next slide, please. The other thing is, this is a slide I took from one public organization, GEC, you can find it on the web, and who have diagnosed the Russian ecosystem for disinformation. It's very elaborate, very complex, working at different levels. I will not go into each and every part of it. It is official part. There is a state-funded part for global messaging, and there's also the use of proxies, organizations other than yourself that work for you directly or indirectly. There is the social media, which are abused or weaponized, as it's called here. And of course, there is the sheer cyber crime, the attack against government websites, against government institutions by cyber criminals that are part of the security resources of the country, in this case the Kremlin. So quite elaborate. Take a look at this website too. Each of these columns, each of these pillars of the media ecosystem of the Kremlin has different components and different constituents, and they all are all explained in this website, and I think quite carefully. Next slide, please. Now, having an ecosystem for disinformation is one thing, but the question is, of course, what comes out of it, and what does it produce? And here is just a snapshot of something that we diagnosed as the colleagues in working for the EU versus disinformation. Diagnosed as the disinformation about Ukraine and the standoff between Russia and the so-called West. One claim was that Ukraine is a non-democratic state, and that as such it has no right to exist. Second claim was that Ukraine is a place full of Nazis, and as a result has also has no right to exist. A third claim was the claim of that Ukraine was committing atrocities, genocide against the Russian-speaking population in Ukraine in general, but especially in the east of Ukraine, in the parts that are occupied by Russia, before they were occupied by Russia. And last element was that yes, there is a war in Ukraine, but the cause is not Russia. The cause is the West, NATO, that with its offensive, aggressive posture meant a threat to Russia, and as a result, it was legitimate to attack Ukraine. So Here, I will not go into all the points there, but you see there what we have attempted to do to try and simply contradict and correct the disinformation that is spread, and to by providing information that we believe to be correct. Very factual approach here. It's not argumentative, it's not meant to be, but it's just meant to provide corrections to the allegation made based on factual information. Next slide, please. Fighting disinformation is, of course, something you can do legitimately only if you follow certain principles and objectives. If you don't, then of course you commit the same sort of crime as or abuse as your opponent. And for that reason, in all the documents that the EU and law proposals that the EU has put forward over the past couple of years, you will see a tremendous emphasis on transparency, on diversity of points of view, on the credibility of information, and on the inclusivity of information. And those are all big words, but you all use, I'm sure, Wikipedia. You're all researchers. Let's put it this. Sorry. You're all researchers yourself. Now, what does your supervisor, your professor, demand from you? Is precise all these elements of transparency, diversity of sources, verifiable sources, credibility of sources, and of course the inclusivity, that you not purposely exclude points of view. So those are very fundamental things that you need to practice as a researcher, but also as a disinformation fighter. We've drawn up quite some action plans over the years. They have been updated and adapted to the new situation, to improve our detection capacity, for instance, and to develop our cooperation within the European Union, amongst the 27 member states, but also between the European Union countries and partners outside. Very important to include the private sector in all of this. If you don't have a partnership with the Googles, with the Yahoos, with the Amazons, with the YouTubes, etc., then of course you will not achieve your goal. So we have drawn up, that's the last bullet of that on that slide, the code of practice on disinformation, which the big internet platforms have all subscribed to voluntarily, even before we drafted legislation. So that is very, involvement of private sector is essential. Lastly, rapid alert system. We live in an integrated border crossing information society. You can only succeed if you cooperate with your neighbors within the EU, of course, amongst the member states, but also looking beyond the EU with the UK, with Canada, United States, Australia, and indeed Indonesia. So, rapid alert system with partners that you trust. Next slide, please. This is the big innovation that the EU has created over the past 2 years, and it came into force this month, the Digital Service Act. Everybody who's interested in the information society, in the regulation for creating this cyberspace where you can promote companies, where you can have entrepreneurism, where you can have communication between yourselves here with friends or partners sitting on other continents, etc. That is the freedom that the internet has created. It's vital. But of course, there is a downside of it, and that is that, as you know, the big cyber platforms in the world, the Googles and the Alphabets, the Facebooks, they've all become so strong that they have tended to try and monopolize their sectors and gobble up other firms that could pose a competitive threat, etc. That has to be tamed or managed somehow, or else you would lose your diversity of supply in the cyberspace. So that is one important thing that the Digital Services Act has done. And the second thing that the Digital Service Act has done is to introduce for Europe greater accountability and transparency about how we handle information, about the quality of information, about what we consider harmful information and not harmful information, what we consider hate speech and not, and what we consider illegal or not. And this is very, very complex, very difficult, because of course you have to do something about problems, but you don't want to dismantle the freedoms that the internet and the cyberspace have created, the opportunities. So this is what we have put into place, came into force at the start of this month, and we have now until the 1st of January 2024 a phase-in period for the companies to adjust and to set up mechanisms for complying with our new laws. Now, why is that important? It's important just to illustrate because of things that you now see with Twitter at the moment. Now, I don't know who of you who uses Twitter here. It's more for the older generation, maybe. Then I think who uses Instagram? I thought who uses TikTok? Now, Twitter was bought up by Elon Musk, and in the past couple of days, even that he has, since he owned the company, has caused a revolution over there in terms of the management of the company, but also in terms of the abolition, the total abolition of the code of conduct that Twitter had developed before Elon Musk took it over, to regulate things like harmful content, hate speech, false information, disinformation, and so on. And you will recall that former President Trump of the United States, at a certain moment, was no longer allowed by Twitter to use his account. 80 million followers or something, it's massive. And Elon Musk has turned this back overnight, which is, of course, it's his company, you may say, he has the right to do it, but it is, of course, at the end of the day, very questionable that a private entrepreneur decides, within law, what is good for you and me to read, and what is good for somebody to write on. So, very, very delicate things that we hope we have catered for in this Digital Service Act. We're quite proud of this piece of legislation. It's very complex, and I am certain that we are a leader, a global leader in how we manage that. Why could we do that? Because at the end of the day, we have 450 million
inhabitants, a population, a large economy, so we have critical mass. We have the capacity as a result to tell the Googles and the Alphabets and the TikToks, we don't like this and that, let's solve this together, and the result is now in Venezuela law, and you will not be surprised when I say that I regularly knock on the door of the Ministry of Communication and Information to say to the minister, look here, this is a fantastic thing. You don't need to photocopy it, but it's free for you to use for Indonesia as well. Next slide, please. That is about partnership. One partnership is what I've just mentioned, the partnership with Indonesia and other countries, of course, that we wish to develop to strengthen the integrity and the consistency of a regulation. Within Europe, we have our parliament, we have the member states. Outside Europe, we have international partners, and there WHO, the World Health Organization. Why do I mention it there? Because you will recall that at some point in the start of the pandemic, there was a lot of disinformation about COVID, about vaccines and the lot. So WHO has been an important partner. And others, but also very importantly, the civil society, the media, evidently journalists, and the consumer. In other words, people like yourselves and myself. So last slide, the challenges. First of all, the qualification. I'm standing here in front of you saying what I have just said, and why would you listen to me? And of course you should, but you should also be critical. And the thing to stress is that this is not a debate about I'm right and you are wrong, because right and wrong, there is subjectivity, there are different points of view, and disinformation, however, is about creating an equal basis for information provision. It's about respect for citizens and about not abusing citizens through presenting things on. It's about rights and obligations for the people who shape the internet and who participate in the online debates. And we want to, of course, ensure that people are free to choose platforms of information, and that within the platform they are not led by algorithms to always the result that the one who pays most money likes, but that there is an opportunity of choice on internet, and that is regardless of whether you're right, whether you're right or telling the truth or not. So that is one. Secondly, role of the media. The traditional media are in crisis. That's true in Indonesia, it's true in Europe, it's true everywhere, because the competition from the social media, from platforms that provide information and news free of charge, that competition is fierce or even unfair. So you see that in Indonesia too. So, but still we need media, the traditional media, as a solid anchor, as a counterweight against the amount of things that float about on the social media and in the cyberspace. So independent media are a crucial factor in the fight against disinformation, and they are a crucial factor for your capability to gather information from sources that are more reliable, that are run by professional editors, that produce stories by professional journalists and not some amateurs like myself, and etc. So very, very important to, as government, but also as consumers of information, to not forget about the place for the traditional media. And for that reason, I pay subscriptions to a couple of classically printed periodicals next to everything I read on the internet. Third bullet there is journalists and what we have sometimes seen, the aggression against journalists. Journalists are people who have to earn their money by writing, and they survive by the quality of what they write, and they survive by the quality of what readers see and recognize. People who spread disinformation don't like journalists, because journalists seek objectivity and consistency and coherence, the total picture, etc. And in my home country, the Netherlands, there were cases during the COVID pandemic where people protested against this or that, a vaccine or wearing a face mask, etc. And they literally aggressed journalists, have done nothing wrong to them, to those demonstrators, but they had reported on things in a certain way that the demonstrators didn't like. That is, of course, a phenomenon, that aggression against journalism, that is very bad, and that we have to watch out for. So, protecting the media profession, journalists, is something that is in the interest of everyone. And my last bullet there, and that's the closing bullet for this talk, is addressing foreign disinformation. You can still say, okay, in Indonesia we sort out our things, and the same for Europe, etc. But of course, the problem is often elsewhere. It comes from people we don't know, we don't even know the existence of, and until they attack our ministry of this or that, or websites with a cyber attack or similar. So addressing foreign disinformation is very, very important, and it is very difficult. But here, typically, of course, Europe is lucky because we are large. We are 450 million, and we have a very strong and big cyber space. But even us, we need partners abroad, in Europe, in Asia, and in the Americas. And we need to discuss fighting cybercrime in platforms like the G20. And certainly, I'm sure that Indonesia will also feature this topic in its presidency of ASEAN next year. And as EU, we are very keen to collaborate with Indonesia on that topic. Last slide is my propaganda slide. So, read carefully. So, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your delightful presentation, dear His Excellency, Mr. Ambassador of the European Union to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam, Mr. Vincent Piquet. On his public lecture, Mr. Ambassador said, starting with the COVID-19, that the European Union facing different concepts of how to face several threats in digital era, and also how to define disinformation and fake news, because perhaps in UNESCO we already have some definitions, but perhaps there is the new development of that definition. And also Mr. Vincent Piquet also said about 2015 European Union versus Disinformation program. Yeah, and here how we also providing like the several regulations, yeah, to face disinformation and also fake news happening, and several also cases in disinformation in cybercrime, how to also give or create information society. European Union wants not just within European countries but also do the collaboration with other countries, especially Mr. Fangsal Piquet said about in G20 we also discuss about how to fighting the cybercrime. And ending with the name, very famous name, Elon Musk, yeah. And we face also perhaps how to diminish unfair competition, perhaps in digital era, and also in journalism world, we also face so many challenges. So here, to sharpen the main ideas that Mr. Ambassador already mentioned about the European context in digital era, several study cases in disinformation and fake news, and also the European way to maintain civic education about digital challenges, as well as to sharpen the European point of view on disinformation and fake news, European approach on creating a civic space in digital era. Let's open the discussion session. So perhaps here we could take 4 questions, Mr. Ambassador, if you don't mind. Okay, dear students, dear ladies and gentlemen, if you think that you can develop, yeah, the main ideas about what Mr. Ambassador already gave on his public lecture, please you can raise your hand and you can come forward to ask several questions. And I will choose based on my feelings, if you don't mind, because there are many questions. Yeah, yeah. Okay. The first question, perhaps, yeah, on my right. Yeah, this beautiful girl with glasses at the back. Yeah, please come forward to deliver your questions, please.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity, ma'am. Dear His Excellency Ambassador, my name is Raisa. I'm from majoring International Relations, batch 2021, Diplomacy Class 1. And I would like to ask about G20 context. So my question is, what collaboration of digital literacy program do you think that Indonesia and Europe can develop more opportunities for undergraduate students to upgrade their digital literacy? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Elsa. And for the other questions, okay, perhaps the first on the right, so on my left, yeah, on my side, yeah, the student, yes, please. Please remove the mask.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity, ma'am. Dear His Excellency, Mr. Ambassador, my name is Muhammad Rafi Febriansyah, and I'm majoring in IR Class 2, batch 2022. And I want to ask around about the cybersecurity. European Union was it ever being hijacked in the case of Estonia back in 2007. So my question is, how European Union strengthen their regulations on cybersecurity or anticipations against the cybercrime? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, yeah. And the third, so we could take together, sir, and then you can answer. On my right, yeah, yes, in front, yeah, yes, please. Please remove the mask. Okay.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity, ma'am. And dear His Excellency, Mr. Ambassador, my name is Felicia Florenza. I'm majoring in International Relations, batch 2022, from class 1. So I want to ask a question about VUCA or VUCA. So digital era is the era of VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Do you think artificial intelligence governance as a new European Union external policy tool will be more certain? That's all my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Felicia. And I also can see several Puma IR committed. Yeah, so Puma is student organization who organize this event. Perhaps one representative, yeah, from Puma. Okay, yeah, the student at the back, please come forward.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I have written my questions here. So there is Excellency Mr. Ambassador Vincent Piquet. Sir, my name is Arnold Tavara, International Relations, Defense Concentration 2021. The question I'm about to ask is as follows. The European Commission are called to propose a regulation to establish common cybersecurity measures across the European Union institution. In this case are the bodies, the offices, and also the agencies. The question here is, do you have a specific perspective about ASEAN future, and perhaps one day we have common cybersecurity measures just like the European Union did? Thank you in advance.
Thank you so much, Ahmad Damara. So, Mr. Ambassador, there are several questions. I can perhaps read, yeah. From Keiza, it's about in G20 context, sir, how perhaps Indonesia and Europe can develop more opportunities in digital diplomacy. And from Datansia, it's about European Union perhaps not really very good experience, yeah, about the cybercrime. Estonia was being hijacked in 2007. So how European Union anticipate the future cybercrime? And the third question from Felicia, it's asking about VUCA, so something like really uncertain, and how European Union in artificial intelligence governance is really certain. And fourth question from Arnold, asking about the ASEAN future. Perhaps one day ASEAN can be like European Union to have common cybersecurity. So, dear His Excellency Mr. Ambassador, please know your opportunity to answer all the questions.
Well, thanks, and I'm so happy that you give me the impression that you think I know everything, which is not the case. But I'll try to answer your questions. They're very good, and I will have a go at it. Now, first of all, about G20. G20, a group of countries that constitutes about 80% of the global GDP. So very, very powerful in that sense and very important. G20 is also intergovernmental. In other words, there is no legislation, no government, that runs the G20 and that executes what the leaders adopted last week in Bali. So it's all based on cooperation on a voluntary basis between the countries. Whereby I mean to say is that don't expect that after the Bali Declaration the world plus suddenly will change, but it has definitely helped to create a common policy basis, a policy understanding amongst the G20 members, also in the area of cyber, of information technology and artificial intelligence. So that's good, and if I look at it from purely my very self-centered position as ambassador here in Indonesia, I've got a number of new contacts within the Ministry of Communication and Information, a couple of new ideas, a couple of new proposals from Indonesia that we can work on. We have a program funded by the EU, a program of cooperation with Indonesia and other Southeast Asian countries fighting cyber terrorism in general, and other border crossing crimes. So there's something we can do at a very practical level. The bottom line in this area is exchange of know-how between people the experts, the people who run the cyber defense here in Indonesia, and to their colleagues sitting in the capitals of Europe. So I hope that answers Rijke's questions to begin with. The second question, cyber defense in the European Union. Yes, Estonia was rocked by this horrible cyber attack in 2007. There have been others, especially targeting the Baltic states and other countries that are close to or border on or close to Russia. There's no coincidence here, of course. What has been the remedy, if you like, is of course, first of all, investment in the technical infrastructure of the ministry, of the governments, of the countries at risk. And in fact, that's now everybody. And so more investment in technical systems, in software, and in resources, human resources. Human resources in this area are not plentiful, of course. It's hard to find good qualified people who are capable of running these systems of cyber defense. So one is investment in the hard and the soft infrastructure. Secondly, it's a bit what I've mentioned in my talk. It's linking in the ministries of the governments of the EU member states together, bringing together in networks of cooperation for rapid alerts, for sharing know-how, intelligence, and so on, and for practical exchange of best practice about what works in your country and what could work. So that is very, very operational, and it helps. And so that is how we are proceeding further. The question from Felicia, I believe it was. FUCA, I don't understand exactly what it is, but...
Yes, Mr. Ambassador, Felicia asked about FUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Yes. So how do you think artificial intelligence governance as a new European Union external policy will be more certain or give more certainty to European Union?
Yes. Now, we are at the start of this, evidently. We have produced a few policy papers about it, and I hope you can find everything on our big Europa website run by the European Commission in Brussels. So look it up. A couple of papers on artificial intelligence from the technology development and investment angle. We want to make sure that we have an industry, an artificial intelligence industry that matters, that can help our economy and our cyber economy progress. Secondly, we are beginning to put in place a rule set for defining the limits, if you like, of artificial intelligence, of defining what is ethical and what is unethical. So they enter the values domain, very sensitive, evidently. People think differently about these matters, and so you have to find a good common ground that is politically sound, that is economically workable, but also that respects the values that societies hold. So this is a new area of policy. Also comes up in our foreign relations, in our relations with big players around the world. The United States is one, but China is, of course, a very big second. Maybe turn them around, I don't know. So that is definitely something we have to develop as well. Bottom line for me, working in a country like Indonesia here, is what we try to do across the globe. That's where big stakes are at play, where big interests and conflicts of interests happen. The EU will always try to seek partnerships with countries that are stable, that we can trust and rely on, wherever they are, in Asia, in the Americas, in Africa, and here, evidently, Indonesia is a top partner for the European Union in developing cooperation on new areas of policy like in artificial intelligence. Last question from Reynolds about ASEAN, how will it shape up, and particularly in cyber. It's the question for ASEAN. What of course, but from our point of view, we see ASEAN as an entity that's very much inspired by the same goals and objectives and interests as the European Union. We know that when ASEAN was started and designed and developed, content-wise and institutionally, that ASEAN delegations traveled off to Europe, to the EU, to find out and how we had done it and so on. So we are very supportive of ASEAN's development in all areas. We believe that regional groupings like ASEAN, like ourselves, but also like ASEAN and the African Union and in Latin America, there are a couple, are good for multilateralism. Multilateralism is still the only functioning framework we have for governing the world, if you like, with the UN Charter and the UN institutions. The regional bodies like the EU and like ASEAN complement that. They solidify the same principles, the same notions, as does the multilateral order. And the notion is very simple. It's a recognition that present day world, you can't do what you want to do on your own. You are dependent on your partners, and the quality of your progress, the speed of your progress, depends partly on the regional networks, in the regional cooperation, the regional integration that you realize. So that's why we're very keen on ASEAN developing. Very happy that last year ASEAN and EU set up a strategic partnership, and which will be celebrated next month, December, 14 December, with the first EU-ASEAN summit. So the ASEAN leaders and the EU leaders coming together in Brussels for a two-day summit. And Brussels will be a bit fresh and maybe a little bit rainy by that time, so which is very good, because then people will stay in the meeting room.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. So for first question, Kesa, Mr. Ambassador answer, it's about G20, 80% of GDP, so it's like the very powerful countries, included in G20. And we also create so many programs in G20, artificial intelligence included in that program, and also if students or scholars you want to participate in the context of digital or AI, there are many programs and funded by European Union. So it's really important to do the collaboration. And also for the second question from Datansia, it's about cybersecurity attack Estonia, perhaps back in 2007. And Mr. Ambassador answered, there is no coincidence to that cybercrime event. And also we want to strengthen the cyber defense. There are many best practice, or we can sharing the best practice, including the bad experience that European Union already faced about Estonia cyber attack in 2007. For Felicia, the third questions about FUCA, Mr. Ambassador answered. It's also the new concept or the new policy in European Union. Students are encouraged to open European Union website. Here there are many ideas of artificial intelligence, papers, and also programs. how we could also define or redefine it is ethic or not ethic, all programs including in digital or artificial intelligence. So this is also a new policy for European Union. And conflict interest is everything, yeah, it's also always happens. So we have to know how we could define all the threats. And for the last question from Reynold, it's about the ASEAN future. Mr. Ambassador answered that it's really interesting, yeah, for European Union perspective about ASEAN. ASEAN has clear vision and mission, many developments, and we already have ASEAN delegates coming to European Union to learn many things, including about digital diplomacy, cybercrime, cyber defense, cyber security. And in this December, we have European Union ASEAN Summit, 2 days summit in Brussels, to discuss many things and hopefully to discuss how to prevent or anticipate the future cybercrime. Thank you so much for taking all the questions, Mr. Ambassador. And I would like to invite you once again to give conclusion remark on our focus public lecture today about disinformation and fake news, European Union approach on creating a civic space in the digital era.
Yeah, what to say? You've been so patient for so much time already listening to me. I would say we're in this cyber jungle together. Everybody, each and every one of us, as individuals, as a group, we have to make sense of it for the sake of our well-being, for our stability as societies, as economies, and so on. It all starts with individuals like yourselves, like me, the Dean. It's us, our new guest, new professor from Russia. As individual, as student, as researcher, be critical of what you see, what you read. Don't take things at face value. Don't take things for granted. Use your brain. I like watching Poirot. I don't know, who knows Poirot? Poirot, the detective. Yeah? Agatha Christie. Wonderful. I'm sure you can find it somewhere on the web. You know? Yeah. Agatha Christie is the writer. She's British. She died. Sorry? Also good. But Poirot, the brilliant detective, the best detective according to himself in the world, he says, use your little grey cells. That is his method for resolving all these cases, and that is, I think, what we all have to do, especially when dealing with disinformation, and because it's a maze of mirrors and smoke, and that we have to make sense of and get through. And so you're students, so you have a wonderful opportunity to use these little grey cells. Good luck.
Thank you so much, dear His Excellency, Mr. Ambassador, for your conclusion remark. Dear ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our public lecture today about disinformation and fake news, European Union approach on creating a civic space in digital era. In this digital era, we are facing modern threats that force us to be more prepared, more accurate, and more disciplined to react, to post, to publish, because state sovereignty also includes digital sovereignty. Then how do we view the country as the method of inward looking and looking other countries as the method of outward looking? We need specific perspective on how we can formulate regulations related to cybersecurity. Remember, cybersecurity is more complex than digital security. Mr. Ambassador also quoted Hercule Poirot to use our brain or little gray cells. Now I would like to invite His Excellency Mr. Ambassador, representative from President University, the Dean of Faculty of Humanities, representative from Puma IAN, and FPCI, Ibu Afnida Manik, also Ibu Natasha, Ibu Isyana to come forward because we would like to have photo session together. Thank you so much.